Hello, people. How's it going? Well, it's Tuesday here in the land of the frozen north. It's not frozen today, of course. Anyway, how's it going? Um, I'm kind of, piggybacking off some other videos I've been watching about this subject, about authors, their private lives, and what they write. And what do we do about authors who have questionable private lives or accused of crimes or they're not exactly the most nice people to other people, shall we say. Um, let's be honest. Okay, I actually don't care as much as I probably should when it comes to a writer's private life. I'm interested in their lives, the public and the private. But it is true, you do have to sometimes separate what they write with who they are. Because if you like Jack London, I'm going to use Jack London as an example because he was an early influence in my own writing life. Jack London as a writer is very good. Most of what he wrote is very good. A lot of what he wrote would get him canceled in this present century on sensibilities because the man was a racist. I'm going to use that term because the term most people understand and use. He was a racist. He was a socialist. He was a racist. He thought of the white man as superior to everybody else, and so on and so forth. But he also was a very good writer. Most of the time. A lot of his later work, you could tell that this man has some issues with other people who are not of the same skin tone as himself. And by the way, the 1945 movie about Jack London, do not watch. The lack of a better term of describing this film, this is not Jack London they made. This is a film about someone who has his name and is not Jack London because they have whitewashed this film so badly that I didn't recognize this as being Jack London of what I've read. But does that mean that we should not read Jack London? No. I mean, his White Fang and Call of the Wild and a lot of his short stories and The Sea Wolf, they're all great novels and they're all good short stories he's written. But his private life and his non-writing life are not exactly exemplary of good virtues toward other humans. So what do we do about this? Well, basically we have to separate one from the other. But should we? I mean, I grew up reading Jack London. I grew up liking Jack London until I read the biography I've read, and I have two actually. But the more I learned about Jack London, the less his writing I liked, which I'm not sure is fair, and I'm also sure it's not unfair. I mean, should we judge an author by his work or by who he is? Actually, it should be both. But at the same time, Jack London was also a man of his time. Let's not forget that. Sometimes I think when we criticize authors like London and even Lovecraft and even no, go with those two for a moment. Interesting. We also have to remember the society they grew up in, the world they grew up in, the kind of family life they grew up in, and a whole bunch of other things. Lovecraft was a brilliant writer. His horror stories are unique, and they are very good. Not all of them, but most of them are pretty good. I mean, At the Mountains of Madness is my favorite longer story of his. Cold is a good story of his. Dagon is a good story of his. Most of his Cthulhu stories are good as his. But his private life, he was very anti-Semitic, even though he married a Russian Jew. Figure that one out. I think he was trying to overcome his own. I think with Lovecraft, unlike London, I think Lovecraft was trying very hard to overcome his neuroses, his fears, his paranoia about other cultures, other peoples. At least that's what I've read anyway. I mean, I like Lovecraft far more than I like London, because I think with Jack London, he wasn't going to change for anybody. I think Lovecraft was trying to not be those things, but they were just so overwhelming in his psychosis and his psychology, and even it was some of what he wrote, he just couldn't overcome it most of the time. He was a good writer, but he was what he was. He was a person of his time. He was a man of his time. He was an author of his time. A lot of people want to criticize these authors for their personal views and their personal lives and their personal beliefs. And remember, these people are not living now. They're living in their time. They're dead. They can't come back and change their lives. They can't come back and defend themselves. Which is why I really, even with Jack London, I don't reject him completely. He was a man of his time. He really was a psychological ball of neuroses. I mean, he really was trying to prove himself constantly. He was always feeling like he was being set upon. Jack London had a lot of personal demons, which made him what he was. And he was. He was an interesting guy. Don't get me wrong. His life was interesting. His personal beliefs were reprehensible. A lot of them were. But, I mean, yeah, but the thing is with me, when I read about a writer, yeah, I'm interested in their personal life. I'm interested in the persona they preside, what they believe and what they didn't believe. I mean, see, the problem is, I think in a lot of ways we have a litmus test for people who if they're not exactly like us, we have a problem with them. See, there's a few writers I read that I don't agree with. I like their stuff. I mean, I may not approve of what they believe personally, or privately, or publicly, or any other way, but I like what they write. Now, I know very little about what's happening with Neil Gaiman. Whether he's guilty or innocent, I don't know. Okay, I have read very little of his stuff. But should I reject his writing because of the accusations he's being accused of? No. I think you really do have to separate his writing from himself. Up to a point. I mean, if you want to take a real extreme example of why up to a point means something, take Adolf Hitler, for example. He wrote a book. Would I find anything good in him? Probably not. But would I recommend reading his book? Yeah. As a historian, I would recommend reading his book. Just don't believe one single thing he says. Well, believe what he says. Just don't practice what he says. Because you read that book, he tells you what he's going to do if he's put into power. The world, unfortunately, chose to ignore it. But he is probably an extreme example of, yeah, he wrote this horrific book. We should be taking it more seriously. Let's not give him a break. That's the problem. Even I'm hearing my own contradiction. I'm hearing my own trap I'm laying for myself. Because I'm trying to explain this logically, because I don't think you can. You either like an author for his writing or her writing, or you don't. I like Jack London's stories. I like a lot of them. Not all of them. Some of them are kind of boring. I like a lot of some of his novels. I think they're fine. I don't agree with a lot of his racial attitude, but at the same time, see, I think it's a very, very double-edged sword. I think might be the best analogy. Can you like an author whose personal life is, I don't like black people. I don't like people who are not the same color as I am, and yet write brilliant short stories and brilliant short novels? It's a double-edged sword, because are you condoning their actions? Are you condoning what they believe if you like their story, even though their story may not say anything about their personal life other than it's a story? See, that's why it's a personal choice. It really does come down to that who you like as a writer whether you agree with what they believe in personally, or even publicly, or you don't. I grew up on Jack. Rudyard Kipling. Kipling was an imperialist. He believed in the British Empire. He believed in the white race. He believed in the idea of empire, of the Victorian era. He believed in a lot of things, but he also wrote in a way that told both sides of the story with some delicacy here and there, maybe some stereotypes here and there, of course, because I don't think as a writer you can do that. It doesn't even matter what culture you're from. Stereotypes does exist. They are based on actual grains of truth for some of them. But he wrote as an imperialist. He wrote as a British Empire citizen. Should I dislike him because he wrote as an imperialist? No, because I can't. I like a lot of what he wrote. I may not agree with everything he wrote, and I'm not going to. See, I don't think you should agree with everything a writer believes or even what they write. I think if you like every single thing a writer has ever done without being critical of a lot of it, then you're being disingenuous. You're just liking his stuff because he's him or her. Every single writer has written crap. Welcome to my world. Every writer has written something that they don't want the people to see. Or if they do see it, they're hoping it isn't as bad as they know it is. But I mean, Ernest Hemingway was a drunk. He was a drunk. He was a womanizer. He was all kinds of things. But yet he wrote brilliantly. He wrote great stories and great short stories. Should I just not read his stuff because he was an alcoholic and a womanizer? That's not going to happen. I like his work. See, I think the problem is it is a double-edged sword. On one hand, you'll have all these writers who have written all these wonderful stories and wonderful this, that, and the other. And then you find out about their personal life or their private life or even their public life. They just say what they believe. It's a personal choice. Liking an author with all the good and the bad and the ugly inside of them and about them and their work, it's a personal choice. I mean, I've read a lot of books that I think a lot of people would question, why am I reading that crap? Well, because I wanted to read it. I'm interested in the book, or I'm interested in the author. Doesn't mean I agree with the author, doesn't mean I like everything the author stands for. But, anyway. I mean, I don't know. I do know. See, I think it comes down to you've got to pick your battles when it comes to reading the writing of people whose private or even public lives you don't agree with. Because I'm sorry, you can pick almost any person who's ever written anything, and I guarantee you will find something in them that will offend you, that will bother you, that will attack or make you question what you believe or what you don't believe. I mean, I'm sorry, you name me a writer who doesn't do this, and I will show you a writer who isn't trying very hard to actually write anything worth reading. In a lot of ways, I think writing should offend people, and offend people in the sense that it makes them think. That's why I write. I write a lot of stuff that I'm hoping offends people because I want them to think. I want it to offend their sense of, I don't need to think about it. I already know what I believe. Those people drive me crazy. I mean, I could use other authors. I mean, Jack London to me has always been that one that I find the most easier to explain, because if you actually read about Jack London's life and the kind of person he really was not a very nice guy, unless you agreed with him on certain issues of race and other things. You read his Hawaiian stories. You read some of his stories he wrote while he was in the South Pacific, and you'll say, I no, this is terrible. What he's writing is horrible. This is ethical porn. The word I'm thinking of, cultural porn or race porn. I'll just say that. The easier way to put it. I mean, he wasn't a very open-minded fellow. A good writer, a very good writer, but not everything. Look, I like Jack London. I like his stories. I don't think much of him as a person. And I really do think that's where a lot of it comes down to. You have to decide what side of the double-edged sword you're willing to fall on or not fall on. Because H.P. Lovecraft, as much as he wrote weird and great stories, he at least, I think, mostly through his life, tried to overcome his own prejudices. I think he slowly was trying to overcome his own prejudices. I think he recognized his own prejudices. I don't think Jack London cared. I mean, you read a lot of the stories. I mean, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. This idea came. I was watching another YouTube channel today that brought up this subject. I mean, the thing is, there are a lot of writers I've read that I really question why they wrote what they wrote and what were they really thinking. And all I have to do is read their biographies to find out, which is true. But sometimes I wonder if they're hiding something, because you gotta kind of wonder why Nabokov wrote Lolita. Now, I've read Lolita. And yes, it's exactly what you think it is. Though it implies it. It doesn't describe anything. It implies a lot. So should I stop reading everything else he's written because of this one book? Because I've read other stuff. I read a biography about him too. He's an interesting guy. I do kind of wonder why he came up with this idea. I mean, literature offends people because they want to be offended, or there really is something there to offend them. I mean, if you're going to choose an author to be offended by, make sure it's an author worth being offended by. Hitler wrote a book. That should offend you. Because what he wrote, he meant to do. He wasn't kidding. He wasn't trying to hide anything. He was telling the world, this is what I'm going to do if you put me in charge of a country. I just think I'm using that as an example because I think that's the most extreme example I can think of. I'm not even sure it works. I think I know what I'm trying to say, and I'm probably failing at it. It is a double-edged sword about liking an author over what they wrote and who they were publicly and privately. I mean, I could probably come up with other authors who are probably just as bad. John O'Hara, nobody liked. He was an unpleasant, unlikable drunk and got into fights with a lot of people. That doesn't mean that what he wrote is not worth reading. I mean, I'm almost done with a biography of him, and so far what I'm reading about him, I'm surprised nobody shot him. Hasn't shot him at this point. He's an asshole. Sorry, but he is. He already was. He's dead now. It's getting longer than I thought it'd be. But I think my point is, well, I guess my only point is deciding if an author is worth reading because of their personal or public life, public or private life, or what they wrote is a personal choice. I'm not going to tell somebody not to read somebody like Jack London or H.P. Lovecraft or O'Hara or Hemingway or even Stephen King. You read Stephen King and you tell me that there's not tropes in there that are questionable. There are. And I like Stephen King. I like his short stories, but that's neither here nor there. Now I'm getting off the topic. Anyway, my point is that, you know what? You have to judge an author by time that they lived, not our time. Not even a time. You cannot judge them by the time before they lived or the time after they lived. You really do have to judge them by the time they lived, their influences, their lives, their family, the influences, basically, again. It's the only way to do it and be fair. You can't put them into your present day and age, and you can't put them in the present day and age before they were born. You really do have to judge them by the standards of the day and realize, okay, yeah, they were what they were. They believed what they believed. They did what they did. Well, they're dead. They can't come back and defend themselves, and they can't come back to change anything. And they've written what they've written. Either enjoy what they wrote and somehow figure out a way to not let their personal or public lives bother you too much. Because people like Lovecraft and Jack London and Hemingway and O'Hara wrote some good stuff. They did write some pretty good stuff. I've read at least one O'Hara story. Anyway, I don't want to go beyond 20 minutes, so it's already 20 minutes. I might do another one on this anyway. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Thank you for listening. Behave yourselves, people, because you know I'm not going to. My glasses are crooked for some. Behave yourselves. Later.